Everyone partakes in consuming media. You might watch TV or movies, read books or graphic novels, play games or do activities. This is what you might call escapism, although it is a bit more complicated than that. But that's the topic of this presentation. In this presentation, we will attempt to answer the question, what is escapism and how does it affect people? It will provide a definition for escapism, we will attempt to answer why people use escapism, talk about fiction identification, and the pros and cons of escapism. The best way to start would probably be to target the first part of my question and try to define escapism by asking, what is escapism? Many of my sources gave a definition for escapism. For example, TV Tropes, on the topic of escapism, quotes the other wiki by saying, a mental diversion by means of entertainment or recreation. As an escape from the perceived unpleasant or banal aspects of daily life, it can also be used as a term to define the actions people take to relieve persistent feelings of depression or general sadness. On the fantasy subreddit, when asked about the topic of escapism, user Tamonro says, it's something that takes you away from your daily grind. One man's escapism may be another man's daily grind. This, a commenter states, can be shown by the fact that many film, game, book, food, etc. critics end up finding what they critique to be a grind to get through after a while, despite having enjoyed them previously. User Mad Cow Bomber states similarly that escapism is a process by which one uses diversions, like TV, games, etc., to avoid dealing with difficult or stressful times in one's life. J. L. Derrick, PhD, from the Research Institute of Addictions, when interviewed, had this to say on the subject. When people face uncomfortable or unhappy realities, they may choose to leave this reality or escape. In other words, they will find a method of distracting themselves from the current situation. They may seek a method of achieving a more desirable state. People might do this through engaging in fiction, e.g. television, movies, reading, exercise, or even psychoactive substances. To put it simply, escapism is an activity or action used to distract oneself from the negativity or negative events or happenings in life. But I wouldn't say it's that simple. In its simplest form, that answers the first half of my question. But there's more to it than that. To reach a satisfactory answer, what we need to do is explore why people turn to escapism. Going back to Miss J. Derrick, PhD, when asked what causes people to turn to escapism, she said, people may be more likely to turn to escapism when they feel bored, unhappy, or somehow dissatisfied with some aspect of their lives. For example, when people are underemployed or dissatisfied with their jobs, they may seek escapism. Certain types of people seek certain types of escapism. When people feel disenfranchised, they may be more likely to seek escapism. There was some support for this during a survey distributed on the internet. For example, those who identified as escapists were more likely to say that comedy and sci-fi, comedy being a generally light-hearted genre, and sci-fi being set in a place or time with the ability to solve common problems or at least be necessarily interesting, were their favourite genres. While in comparison, non-escapists were much more common to state that reality television, documentaries, or other genres that reference current events and harshness were their favourite genres. Responses during the survey and talks of online forums show this as well. Many people saying that they simply hate reality and don't want to deal with it. The way they see it, they should escape as much as possible from the harsh reality and try to exist in a better way. This leads well into the interesting subject of fiction identification and social surrogacy, which is, as I stated literally seconds ago, a very interesting subject. Fianuala Butler and Cynthia Pickett wrote in their article Imaginary Friends, parasocial relationships are the kind of pseudo-relationships we develop over time with people we might see on TV. The article then goes on to paraphrase an article published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology called The Social Surrogacy Hypothesis by J. Derrick, Shia Gabriel, and Kurt Hugenberg. This hypothesis states that loneliness makes people seek out relationships, even when they are not real. Research demonstrates that participants were more likely to watch the TV shows when they were feeling lonely, and more importantly, it helped them with their loneliness. Other things of note are also that participants who had recently had fights with friends or family wrote significantly longer about their favourite shows compared to their non-favourite shows, suggesting they are creating stronger ties to these shows, and that maybe a more specific feeling of lack of belonging makes people revel in the experience of watching their favourite show. Basically, these people were using fake, parasocial relationships to replace the flawed relationships they had in reality. The TV Tropes article, Analysis Escapism, goes in depth to how different stories can relate to this. It starts by saying simply, you are your favorite character, or more so, the reason you like your favorite character is because you identify with that character, or more so, you consciously or unconsciously wish to be that character. These escapist characters allow you to do things you could not do, whether it be due to law, social repercussions, or physics itself. These characters allow people to project themselves onto such a character. This is why you'll find that many times a protagonist character is very basic without too many quirks. This allows the optimal amount of people to identify with the protagonist. This is not to say characters that have quirks and personality aren't escapist characters though, or that shows with many protagonists with different personalities aren't made with the intention with someone to escape into them. These are what you might call niche escapist characters. They exist for smaller groups. People are more likely to identify with characters they can relate to more. So characters with distinct characteristics that someone can relate to are created to capture this niche. This is also not to say that a world or a setting can't be for escapism. Worlds can be created so that you might feel you want to be in it, or you want to be a part of it, because this world innately solves a problem you have. There is also escapism through characters not that we want to be, but characters we want to be with. A character can be one that we want to be companions with. In fiction, main characters almost seem to get friends as an innate part of the universe, and these friends will do anything for each other, and trust each other to the fullest. We escape into the idea that these people may be our friends. There are also characters that we want to be with romantically, the story's romantic interests, or interests. These characters are usually nice, kind, caring, love you, or have other attractive characteristics. These make people want to be with them, be their partner. They show characteristics that are ideal, and make people escape into the idea that they may be in their relationship. Then there are escapist guardian characters, role models that we can escape into. These people treat the main character well, don't have faults or struggles that our guardians and role models may have in real life, and of course we escape into the idea that they are our guardians. Even in non-fiction escapism, you're still escaping to an ideal. You may work out for the ideal of having a good body. You may eat for the ideal of everything being okay. You could be leaving simply so you can be in a place where things aren't there now, and escaping into a world where there doesn't exist. People escape looking for an ideal, a world that fixes their problems, whatever they may be. The overworked businessman may escape to a world where things are calm and laid back. The student, fretting over their grades in the future, may escape to a world where everything is fine and things are handed to them on a silver platter. The little girl who feels their parents don't give them enough power may escape to a world where she has power. Jay Derrick said in an interview, "I think it's important when thinking about escapism to keep in mind that not everyone seeks out escapism for the exact same reasons, and not everyone seeks out escapism in the exact same way." And the point from that really is that people use escapism in different ways to fill whatever they are missing in their life and need fulfillment of. Given that, I think the better way to answer the first part of my question is to say that escapism is the act of taking negatives in your life and replacing them with equivalent fiction or ideals. Now, having answered the first part of the question, logically, we move on to the second part, and that's, how does it affect people? There are two topics of this part, the positive effects and the negative effects, and both are equally important. So we have two sides, one that thinks escapism is good and has positive effects, and one that thinks escapism is bad and has negative effects. So, while looking at the effects of escapism from both standpoints, we'll try and discover whether it is good or bad. So, let's start with the good, yes? In Imaginary Friends, Fiona Butler and Cynthia Pickett write about how escapism, or more specifically parasocial relationships, can help someone get social interaction when they can't access it. Those who watch these TV shows reported being less lonely while watching, and if watched after a negative social event, it even helped them recover. If we're talking about that article, it also states that loss of a favourite TV show showed equal negative responses to that of loss of a real friend, and a TV show usually lasts at best 7 years. Not to mention that, with all the positives that you mentioned, you neglect to mention how replacing actual social interaction with escapism causes people to stop talking to people, or escaping from a fight only stops people interacting, and stops anything from being solved as we're naturally supposed to. Except introversion is a thing, and it has been proven to be a thing, and it makes people simply not want to interact with other people. For example, a 2012 study by Harvard psychologist Randy Buckner found that people who identify as introverts tend to have larger and thicker grey matter in certain areas of the prefrontal cortex, while in comparison, those who identified as extroverts had tinier grey matter, which is a clear physical difference between introverts and extroverts. And then there's the fact that, simply, escaping helps you see things from others' perspectives. To quote G.R.R. Martin, a reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. A non-reader lives but one. And ignoring the decision to say that a reader is definitely a guy, he's saying that escapism can help a person understand different worldviews and grow one's ability to see from an other sides better and can be achieved through normal interaction. And that the escapist gets to experience things a non-escapist can't. By escaping into media, they live another life and a giant, possibly impossible experience. If you want to experience something, you should experience it yourself. Experiencing something that's impossible is little point, since you can't give your perspective on future experiences, but only further escapism. If you want to experience something, go and experience them. There's nothing stopping you from going out and having an adventure. But there is! People can't always do what they want, whether it be due to financial stability, personal problems, or fear in general. Besides, escapism isn't just watching TV shows and playing video games. It's doing something so you can avoid your problems, or distinctly so you can get away from them. Going on an adventure is just as much of an escapism as watching a TV show that goes on an adventure. I feel that we're getting off track, so I'll make a different point. According to the article, Leaving Your Fantasy World and Live in Reality by Feel Happy, escapism has various long-term negative effects. According to this article, escapism makes you think less about your life, causing your real life to become unimportant. In fact, over long periods of time, escapism can actually cause stress, and those working in information technologies or spend prolonged periods of time online have found to have higher chance of depression. This means that those who partake in escapism are moving towards a path of the characteristic NEAT, living alone, talking to no one, hating themselves, and barely surviving. Living only in a fantasy world. This article talks about extremes though, and pretty much every extreme is bad. Salt on chips is great, but putting a whole container on one chip means you probably need to go to the hospital. The subject of depression, I think this is a little bit more of a selection bias to me. It's less about the internet or IT causing depression, but people who go into the IT or use the internet a lot are more likely to be depressed beforehand, likely due to these people being more likely introverted. Plus, you state that escapism is bad because it stops people from facing their problems, but survey results suggest that most people who identify as escapists are doing it because the problem is outside of their control, or would be dangerous to face. Things that have already happened, or have no way to reverse, or things that are simply outside of their control. These people are escaping to solve that problem by taking away the regrets or fears they may have. If we're going back to previous arguments, then I'd say that in spite of what you're saying about introversion existing, that does not counter my point about the long-term effects of escapism. An introverted person is not that of someone who doesn't need social interaction, nor is there any evidence that social interaction can be more easily replaced with media for an introvert. Jay Derrick even said in her interview, after being asked what are the effects of escapism, that people who seek escapism rather than solving their problems will probably be worse off in the long run. Additionally, those who seek particularly unhealthy forms of escapism, e.g. binge drinking, may suffer serious consequences. Also, your argument about using escapism to solve impossible to solve problems ignores the fact that there are much better ways of doing it, most of which including going to a professional. You can fix a blood wound with a potato, but we use a bandage because it's more effective. You neglect the rest of Jay Derrick's response. Before saying that, she says the effects of escapism likely depend partly on what people are trying to escape, what method of escapism they use, and the extent to which they use escapism. She even says that using escapism can help, especially towards events that can hurt someone emotionally. Using your comparison, I would say escapism is more like a bandage, and a professional is more like going to an actual hospital. To end this outside of the argument bit, after asking Jay Derrick in the interview, is there anything else you think I should know? She responded, escapism in and of itself is not inherently good or bad. Instead, the reasons for using it and the methods of escaping may be more important when determining whether it's positive or negative. Despite taking this neutral, it's a case-by-case thing stance after the argument, it's important to still keep in mind the positives and negatives and the arguments from both sides and come to the conclusion based on the situation and the way of escaping and what they are escaping from. Escapism's effects are varied and do depend on the situation. People can get too engrossed in escapism, and that can have a large variety of negative effects, but given casual use, it has positive effects in helping someone relieve stress or depression. But to put everything into some sort of conclusion that answers the question as a whole in an ideally easy to take away form, escapism is the act of taking negatives in your life and replacing them with equivalent fiction and ideals. The effects of escapism vary depending on what you are escaping from and how you are doing it, but nonetheless, escapism should be taken with care and problems that can be dealt with ideally should be. Escapism is not a replacement, but a subsidiary, a secondary to help as well along with normal interactions, or negatives will occur after some time.